Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Today is January 2nd, 2022. I think we'll start off with meditation, since that's, the foundation of all this practice here. And then Victoria's going to continue taking us through the 37 practices of Bodhisattva. There's one or two little readings we'll do, and then we'll do some questions. Since it's New Year and people make resolutions, and probably some of you are new, and I hope it's not the only week you come, people make resolutions and then they disappear really quickly. But so let's just do a really brief review. I'm going to just turn this so you can see. The first thing we do is our posture, right? So I'm using a cushion. Cushion is good to get your hips either level or above your knees. And you can sit, whatever your comfort level, flexibility level is. If you want to do half lotus, if you're really flexible, and do full lotus. Just don't do full lotus when you're in the presence of your teacher. Not meaning us, I mean like a lama, because that's actually disrespectful in a way, Although if you see someone in a teaching sitting in full lotus, they really don't know what they're doing per se, probably, unless they're a realized lama or a high lama themselves or something. But that's neither here nor there. So sitting comfortably, hands either here, like this. I like this, the palm and the back of the hand resting in the lap. That's a good one. Back straight but not rigid, shoulders kind of upright, not back in like some attention, like military attention thing, just really relaxed but straight. So we want the straightness really helps the subtle energy channels, which we're going to get into with the non-purifying breaths, to be aligned so the energy can move freely and unimpededly, right? So shoulders straight, not back, but just really straight and relaxed. The chin usually is slightly down, so we're not like at this attention kind of position, but slightly down so it's comfortable. There's that analogy about like the guitar string. If it's too tight, it won't make a sound. If it's too loose, it won't make a sound. So you want just enough tension. And the same with the body, same with the mind in a way too, right? Just enough tension to keep upright and straight, relaxed. In the mouth, if you can breathe through the nose through this practice, that's the best. If you can't, do whatever you can, right? So it's like the lips are closed, but the teeth can be apart a little bit. You don't want your jaw clenched. You want it relaxed. The tongue is usually resting where the top teeth meet the roof of the mouth. And the eyes, Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we meditate with our eyes open. And you want to just rest on whatever's in front of you. You don't want this intensely locked gaze, and you don't want a spaced out of focus gaze. So just resting, whatever's in front of you, rest that gaze. So now once you're in the position, the breath through the nose, and it should be a relaxed breath, not a deep, not that kind of breath, and not a shallow one, just a relaxed, even breath. And just make the effort to settle into this position, into this pose, into this posture, into that breath. Just like let all the tension go and just settle into that. That's where we begin from. Then we do the 9 purifying breaths. We're going to do that and go right into the meditation. But for those of you who are new and perhaps have never meditated before, Once we go into that, after the 9 purifying breaths, we go into meditation, I'm going to talk you through a little bit about how to work with the mind during meditation. Let's do the 9 purifying breaths. We're imagining 3 channels, 3 subtle body channels. The middle one is blue. Traditionally, the right one in men is white, and the red on the left in females. But for those of you who don't prescribe to either gender or don't want to, define and specifically this gender or that, you make that decision and you make that choice. First, we're going to take this forefinger. We're going to close the thumb around the other fingers around the thumb. We're going to take the right hand and go to the left nostril and breathe into that right channel. And imagine breathing in enlightened air, right? Energy of compassion and peace and loving kindness and things like that. Take it all the way down to the navel where the 3 channels meet, and then switch to the right nostril and then breathe out. Same again. Breathe out. And you're breathing out all that kind of negative emotion, attachment, anger, jealousy, all that stuff. One more. Now we're going to switch and take the left hand, the fingers, 3 fingers wrapped around the thumb, the forefinger pointing out, go to the right nostril, left hand, the right nostril, hold. Breathe in to the left channel and breathe out. Now we'll rest our hands on our lap. We'll move into the central channel, the blue channel. On the third breath, we're going to imagine ejecting that air out of the crown chakra, mingling consciousness with space. And then go into meditation for 9 minutes. For those of you who are new, for those of you who are not new, you know what to do. For those of you who are new, breathing out of the nose, you're going to focus your attention on the place where the space between the nostrils and the upper lip, where the air is moving in and out. Lightly. Focus your attention lightly there. And just focus on the breath as it goes in and as it goes out. If you are new to this, what you will notice very quickly is that your attention moves from that place between your nose and your upper lip and your breath and goes to something else. And that can be whatever. you feeling like you can't do this, you don't want to do this, you're uncomfortable, your body feels stiff, or your body feels sore, or you have an appointment in about an hour and you're cooking lunch and you have to figure out what to make for lunch, anything. That's what the mind does. That doesn't mean you're bad or not good at this or not able to do this. That's what the mind does. That's what everyone's mind does. That's why we're here. That's why we practice. To work with a mind that thinks, that gets lost in thought, in trains and chains of thoughts, and basically how we've lived our lives since the beginning. So, what do we do when that happens? We become aware of the fact that we're doing that. That's really the practice. Go back to the breath. Go back to that attention and that space above the lip, below the nose. Go back to it right now. Once again, most likely we've gone back to thinking about other things. If physically you feel tight and uncomfortable, it's okay to shift. You don't have to be locked in this position and cannot move and cannot shift and cannot, adjust. Adjust and settle back into the pose and the posture. The same with the mind. It's okay if the mind goes and gets distracted and goes off into thought. The key, the cold crux of this practice is becoming aware of what the mind is doing. And that starts with realizing you're thinking. Once you realize you're thinking, going back to the breath. That's really all we're doing right now. All you have to do. Go back to the breath. Go back to placing your awareness on that place here. And relax. And if you can enjoy a little bit of feeling relaxed and just the peace of not having to do anything or process anything, see if you can enjoy that. In this class, we use an image of the clear, blue, pristine, unstained, limitless blue sky, not a cloud in it, right? That as the basis of the mind, the nature of the mind. That is there all the time, whether we know it or not, whether we're aware of it or not. That's the basic nature of our mind. It's always there. And think of the qualities of that. Calm, placid, open, spacious, kind. When we have, even if we have a split second or a second of relating to that, being in that, that's real, and that's what that is. The thought is like the cloud, because thoughts arise from that very place of calm, clarity, unstained, limitlessness, openness. Thought arises, and the thought will go back from whence it came, from where it came, exactly that same place. So if we use the image of the thought arising like a cloud, we become aware that it has arisen, we can, through awareness, watch it dissipate in our mind. Watch that cloud dissipate as the thought will dissipate as well. We also can see the same way a cloud does not affect the sky once it's gone. It doesn't really affect it once it's there, except the fact that we see it, but it's gone, it leaves no trace. We have the blue sky once again, the clear, limitless, unstained sky once again. It's the same with the mind. You may have repetitive thoughts that come and go, and come back and return, like a song you can't get out of your head, but the reality is they do go back into the mind from where they came. Leaving that place of calm and clarity, which cannot be taken away, cannot be altered, it can't be tainted, And emotion is similar to the thought, like emotion's almost like a storm, whereas a cloud is a thought, emotion's like the storm, arises from the same place. Emotion arises from the mind, storm arises from that sky, and then once again will go back to that same place it came. So let's settle again physically and then mentally. Put our attention on that place between the nose and the lip. I'm thinking that I have to get gas before I go on my trip. And then I see that thought as like the cloud in that limitless, clear, unstained blue sky, and just let it go. Settle the body and settle the mind back into that spaciousness of sky. Back to the breath. Okay. I'm going to read something. Nick, thank you for reminding me this. We didn't do, what we really do before we start the class. And what you do every time you do any kind of practice in Buddhism, be it meditation, or if you're doing mantra or mantra recitations, or even making prayers, you always start with setting intention. There's three parts to the practice, right? The beginning, middle, and the beginning is setting the intentions. The middle part is the practice itself, and the third part is the dedication. And because we forgot to set our intentions, Nick, thank you for reminding me. So let's set our intentions for today by saying the four immeasurable prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. So this is what I wanted to read. This is from a wonderful Lama, Chagdud Toku Rinpoche, Chagdud Tulku Rinpoche. If we want to help others eliminate flaws and develop positive qualities, we have to ensure that we ourselves have at least purified our own mind enough to benefit others rather than simply criticize them. We need to focus on our own flaws rather than on others. When we have a negative thought, or even a neutral one, we must try to transform it into a virtuous one. The more we redirect the mind toward virtue, the more its outer expression in speech and action will become virtuous. This will create karma that leads to happiness instead of suffering. If we repeatedly examine our thoughts, words, and actions and tame our mind, our shortcomings will begin to diminish and our positive qualities will increase. The more we reduce our flaws, the more those around us will benefit. The more we enhance our positive qualities, the more we will be capable of helping others to do so. As we practice in this way, we will begin to see differences in our relationships. We may find ourselves becoming more patient, loving, and kind, less likely to get into arguments, more inclined to find peaceful resolution to conflict. Close relationships often provide the greatest test of patience. Our interactions with larger groups at work or in our neighborhood will also show us how well our practice is working. And with that, oh, that's it. Those of you who are on Instagram, which I'm assuming most of you are, because that's how you hear about this. One of the best Instagram sites is Pema Lotus by our Dharma friend and sister Shamel, who's really posts the most lovely teachings all the time. Pema Lotus, Pemalotus. With that, I will turn this over to Victoria to continue our study of the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva by Gochu, Togo.
Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. So we've been going through the 37 Bodhisattva practices. It is a very condensed fifth teaching, which is also the heart teaching of Garchen Rinpoche and is a daily practice for all of us, his students, the Sangha, by Ngulche Togme Zampo. It is considered a practice of the complete path. It has, it speaks to all of the things that we consider the full path. It speaks to ground fruition and result. It speaks to ground conduct to view meditation and conduct. It basically touches on all the points. And so there's a huge benefit in going through each one stanza. I mean, we are covering it, very, to our capacity. We're trying to cover it as much as we can, but you should try to do this as a daily practice. Internalize this practice, because in all the difficult situations, in whatever situations arise in your life, you can find an answer in these 37 Bodhisattva practices and an unmistakable advice on what to do and what not to do and how to view things. It really does answer to every kind of need. So we covered last week, we covered a section that's called taking obstacles on the path. It is actually when obstacles arise that we get to do practice, and we also get to see the efficacy of our practice. We get to see if we're practitioners or it's just lip service, because practice doesn't really happen on the cushion. Practice happens in life. On the cushion, we train to when we get up and difficulties arise, that we can use whatever we've learned on the cushion and have practice be imbued with our life. Practice is when life happens. Practice is not just when we're sitting on the cushion. Actually, sitting on the cushion is just kind of like a repose time. It's a time for reflection. It's a time for habituating, deepening, bringing meditative, bringing things from our analysis, bringing things that from our understanding to a deeper level, making them experiential. We ground them and make them experiential, but then we only practice when we get up, when we interact with others, when the world, when we face the world, everything happens in that space. Just to, go back to one very, very important stanza number 11. All suffering without exception comes from wishing for one's own happiness. The perfect Buddhas arise from the altruistic mind. Therefore, completely exchanging one's own happiness for the suffering of others is the Bodhisattva's practice. I'm going back to this particular verse because it basically it's a teaching, it's a complete teaching of the whole life, of the whole path of the Buddha Dharma in itself. That one verse says everything. It basically underlines the two kinds of beings and everything in between, the samsaric beings and the bodhisattva beings. You know, it's all the suffering without exception comes from wishing for one's own happiness. That's us, samsaric beings, the beings that grasp, that have self-grasping and grasp at ego and permanence of things. And then it has the other beings, the perfect Buddhas, which arise from the altruistic mind, you know, and of course bodhisattvas are included in that mind. So it's very important to really try to think what that is. What is this? The samsaric being, the samsaric mind, and the bodhisattva or Buddha mind. Samsaric mind, the holistic mind of self-cherishing, like the one we have now, just as a non-dualistic mind of complete awakening, of Buddhahood. These are states of consciousness. It's like the gradual transition between deep darkness into complete light. They are degrees, they're never separable in their nature. Bodhisattvas are those who started as ordinary samsaric beings like us in the dark, but they have transitioned into an awakened state of consciousness. They're beings who have cultivated the highest state of awareness in order to benefit and liberate all sentient beings, and have given rise to a state of consciousness which is called bodhicitta. So therefore, you know, bodhicitta is the, it's translated as the state of awakening. You know, we're obviously talking about a state of consciousness. This is what the bodhisattvas and the Buddhas have. They have this altruistic mind. Bodhicitta is translated often as altruistic mind. In other words, it's not just like being a kind guy. What that means is that you have prajna, and you've liberated, you have wisdom, which is prajna, and you have cured and liberated samsaric energy, and you have brought that energy into a higher level, into a mind of, you know, awakening, into awareness of an awakened mind. What does bodhicitta mean? And who are these bodhisattvas who now have the consciousness that is called bodhicitta? Their intention, their life, their mind, and their action are bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is something where the view and the action arise from the same source, you know, out of this mind of enlightenment, out of the mind of awakening. So what does this mean? Who are they? These beings who started just like us, they have eliminated the mind of self-grasping, the type of mind that we now have. And they have reached through practicing and traversing the Buddha Dharma path, a mind of awakening, a mind of bodhicitta. A basic meaning of bodhicitta is the desire to achieve a state of enlightenment in order to benefit, to liberate all sentient beings from samsara. On a practical level, it is practicing the exchange of one's own happiness for the suffering of others. We know this practice as Tonglen. This was one of the very first practices that we actually introduced in this class, because on many levels, this is something that's familiar to us. You know, we practice this for beings that we love. We would easily exchange, you know, the suffering of our children for our own. We would take away the suffering of our parents and, you know, experience it for ourselves and give them happiness. We know this. This is something that's very innate, but we practice it in a very, very narrow context, in the context of what is called attachment, because we have attachment to loved ones, you know. We cannot expand that to all beings, you know, and certainly we can't expand it to anyone that we consider an enemy. So, you know, we cannot expand it beyond this kind of like a very samsaric, narrow, tiny little frame of a mind that's very attached. So Tonglen is the heart of what is called Buddhahood, and, you know, of the beings that we call bodhisattvas. You know, the perfect Buddhas arise from altruistic mind, therefore completely exchanging one's own happiness for the suffering of others is the Bodhisattvas practice. The last 8 verses that we have gone through have been dedicated to that very practice. This, you know, taking obstacles on the path has directly to do with that. It's not just that we understand that everything is illusory. So when someone is like taking something away from us, that we simply understand that we are a part of that formula, that a situation is arising now when someone is taking something away from us. It's almost like a restoration of balance, because in the past we have been participants, we took something away from someone else. It's not merely that, it's not merely restoring the balance. We're going beyond that with Tonglen. We're saying, let these beings, not only do I want to restore the balance and give them what they're taking away from me right now, because I have planted that seed in the past. I want to go beyond that. I want to not just give whatever these beings desire to take away from me. I also want to wish them happiness. I want to do Tonglen for them. We are trying to go to that higher mental state. It's about very radical reversal of our ordinary thinking, which is selfishness and ignorance at its basis, self-grasping. Now we practice to reverse that habitual pattern, to exchange it for a greater consciousness that is of bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas, if somebody comes and wants something from them, they can cut off their limb to feed you if you're hungry. That level of mental consciousness, that's not being a nice guy. This is something that's vastly, vastly beyond. Only compassion for others based on wisdom of emptiness of the self and of phenomena could lead us to awakening, can lead us to enlightenment. We do need to understand the ultimate truth, the nature of all things. We need to understand the basis. There is no permanence. There's really nothing to hold on to. These things that we may want to hold on to, the things that somebody wants to take away from us, they're illusory. There is no point, But we, of course, want to go beyond that understanding of impermanence and emptiness through the sense of impermanence. We want to really address selfish grasping mind that believes in some sort of permanence, which has always been the ground of samsara, the ground of suffering. We want to eliminate that particular mind of self-cherishing, of grasping to what he's taking away from me is mine. He's taking away from me. We want to eliminate that mind. Forget about the things that we sacrifice. They don't exist to begin with. They're only here for a moment and then they're gone. We want to really address the samsaric grasping mind. Because it is that samsaric grasping mind that is the causes and conditions of endless pain and discomfort. We want to go from being ordinary samsaric beings to being bodhisattvas. That is vastly, vastly different. It's very radical. It's not that we're just being nice guys. Needless to say, we start practice by trying to be, altruistic beings. We examine our actions. We engage in the practice, but our goals should be set at a much, much higher standard. If you have bodhicitta, you have wisdom, you have compassion, and therefore you can take all the obstacles on the path with you. Those are the conditions. You have wisdom that understands impermanence, emptiness, wisdom that understands karma, cause and effect, the interdependence. You understand that you always have forever created these difficult situations with others that arise for you right now. And you understand the empty, illusory nature of these kind of arisings. You know that these arisings, they will come and go. They will dissolve like clouds in the sky. The balance will be restored. Things will dissipate. Because of emptiness, there is always movement. There's potentiality to go from dark to light. And so we set our intention from going from like the samsaric darkness into the light of Buddhahood, which is just our nature. And it is only when meeting difficult circumstances do we actually engage the practice and we engage the path. So to continue with reading our verses, number 18 says, though one may have an impoverished life, always be disparaged by others, afflicted by dangerous illness and evil spirits, to be without discouragement and to take upon oneself all misdeeds and sufferings of beings is the Bodhisattva's practice. When your mind has wisdom and your mind knows how to act, compassion, you're okay with whatever arises because you understand whatever arises, if you deal with this right now in the proper way, you will dissolve those karmic seeds. They will not arise for you again and again and again. You also understand, self-grasping has to be annihilated. You have to start to live a life without self-grasping, because otherwise there'll always be samsara, there will always be suffering, there will always be darkness. And that's how you're able to you can take the difficulties and turn them into fuel for growth on your path to Buddhahood, to awakening. You take all the difficult circumstances, you incinerate them in the fire of awareness, and you act on that basis. So then you engage in the practice of the Bodhisattvas. When you have the wisdom, you can take the difficulty, you can burn it, use it as fuel. You can transform it and not go, he's doing bad things to me, he's taking my stuff. No, you're looking at that person, you're going, here, you needed more, take it. You understand, you claim responsibility, you have awareness, you also understand impermanence, you have the light in your mind and you're on the path. You're not grasping selfishly. You can give away, and you can, you can wish for that person every good in this world. Believe me, your reality will be metamorphosed. It will be your life will be very different. Though one may be famous and revered by many people or gain wealth like that of Vaishravana, having realized the worldly fortune is without essence, to be unconceited is the Bodhisattva's practice. This is verse number 19. This verse pertains to a specific thing, that if we do have wealth as a result of previous, virtuous karma, we have the benefits or we have fame in this life. What to do with it is to take it with us on the path, convert it for the sake of, enlightenment. In other words, benefiting others. Convert whatever means and good things that you have in your life, whatever you can, convert it for the benefit of all sentient beings. Don't grasp. The important thing is also not to grasp to it and I go, I am rich, I am famous, and misuse all of these kinds of things and create horrendous karma for yourself and others. You want to be conscious of what you have and understand how you can wield it in a positive way for the benefit of all sentient beings. This next one is a very, very important verse number 20. If outer foes are destroyed while not subduing the enemy of one's own hatred, enemies will only increase. Therefore, subduing one's own mind with the army of love and compassion is the Bodhisattva's practice. This is a very, very pivotal verse, because it says basically that subduing the enemy of one's own hatred, and then it says subduing one's own mind. Hatred is one's own mind. So, eliminating or moving away from difficult people, that's one small, step that we can take. And it's an important step, needless to say that. But then when we've moved away from them, very often we're left with an internal sense of where we think of, just recollecting that person, in one's mind causes all of these antagonistic, feelings of hatred and aversion. So that is the real enemy, because the mind is like a reflexive mirror surface. If you have that internally, along comes another person who brushes by you on the subway in the wrong way, and that person becomes an enemy, and you obsess about them. If you have not subdued the hatred in your own mind, if you have not quenched the fire of that hatred, the enemy is just always around the corner. It's nominal. You can place that anger on an object. You can place that, the door that slams, or your neighbor who makes too much noise. You instantaneously place that anger on anything else, in different forms. Maybe it's not hatred, but now it's like aversion or irritation or impatience. All of those are different forms of anger. So if you don't examine your mind and you don't abandon the internal thing of that anger from within, enemies will always multiply. It's like in Greek mythology, we have the Hydra, you know, we cut off one head, the three heads grow. This is the same. So what we need to do is go to the source. The source is our mind. We have to look at our mind and examine it and really work very, very hard to replace, convert that energy into, because we can't just, you know, the way we eliminate the 5 poisons is that we convert that energy into the mind of loving kindness. You know, compassion is the other side of the hatred, you know, and aversion. It's not like we take one away, put it into one drawer, and then we acquire another thing. It's actually that very energy that becomes transformed within the process. So next time you meet someone and your mind gets hateful, you know, before you open your mouth and spill all that stuff to the outside, catch it right in that moment. You know, have your awareness, grab that and convert it and go, I am angry at you, but you know what? I'm going to look at you with compassion right now. I'm going to see that you're not someone who's doing bad things to me, but you're someone who is suffering under, you know, some kind of a mental illness, you know, and I'm not going to be another mentally ill person right next to you and engage with you in this screaming and hateful thing. I'm going to love you. I'm going to tolerate. And I'm going to have, above all, I'm going to have awareness. I'm also going to know that this is a moment in time and it will not persist. And I'm going to do everything to dissolve your pain by first dissolving my own suffering and not allowing my pain to spill on top of you. I'm going to take that pain, I'm going to use that energy, and I'm going to transform it into loving compassion. That's what the Bodhisattvas do, and that's also what our aspiration. So, you know, continue to practice and read the Bodhisattva practices.
Thank you, Victoria. Just to point out, so much of what Victoria just spoke about, the word that keeps coming up over and over is mind. You know, for those of you who are new here, we're discussing basic Buddhism, really. And we're not really talking anything in terms of religion, edicts and, you know, dictates, and this is what you know, it's working with the mind, you know. And when we, before we started discussing Buddhism in this class, you know, we asked our teacher, Garchen Rinpoche, if this was permissible to do, because we're part of a lineage, and in order to give respect to that lineage, you know, we felt it proper to ask. And he said, yes, that's fine to discuss Buddhism, basic Buddhism, but to keep the focus on the mind, because Buddha is not simply the name of a man, it's the name of mind. So that's food for thought. And everything we experience through the mind. Even if we experience it through the body, it's a mind that's processing the sensory input that the body is experiencing, and the mind processes that and interprets that. So this is what we're working with and what we're focusing on. So go ahead.
I just wanted to say that experience is always awareness. If we're not aware of it, we will not experience it. So the ground for everything is the mind. So just with that in mind, know that that mind is yours, and you can choose how to direct that mind. You have, you know, direct power over it. But of course, you know, wisdom is essential to have that mind be a conduit for the right type of action. So that's why we study.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, we could take a few questions if you have them. If we can answer them, we will. Where do you study? We study Garchen Rinpoche. I mean, we've had the benefit of attending a lot of teachings of a lot of different lamas. pretty much all in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. Our teacher, Garchen Rinpoche, has several centers around the world. His main one, where he spends most of his time, is in Chino Valley, Arizona, Garchen Buddhist Institute. You can check that out online. If you follow me on Instagram, I post a lot of, little onto stories and stuff. I post a lot of teachings from different lamas. So, and if you go into the archives on YouTube for these classes, we read from a lot of different Tibetan Buddhist lamas all the time, so you can follow up through that as well. Is breathing the most important thing in meditation? The mind, meditation is really about working with the mind. The title of the book, it's also on our website, on Nick's. Nick, where can we find the text, the PDF, and or the name of it? Is it on the your website or the YouTube? Let me know, please. If you want to text me that info, Nick, and then I'll relay it to the students here, because I get kind of confused. Nick will let us know. How often should one meditate? The best thing to do is to start, through meditation, working with the mind, we're working with a mind that has been habituated throughout our lives and throughout countless lives in a Buddhist point of view, right? So in order to start to work with that and start to change the way we relate and to cultivate awareness and mindfulness and stuff, it takes a real overhaul of what we've been doing. And that really only happens when we start to make it very consistent and integrate it as part of our lives. How much should we meditate? Make it part of your routine, make it part of your daily routine. When you wake up in the morning, after breakfast, before you shower, you're going to sit in. And the best thing to do if you're new is start with very short periods of meditation. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. That's the best thing you could do. You can, try to make it consistent where you do it. Set up a comfortable place in your house. The important thing is to be consistent and to keep doing it. If you miss a day because you're traveling or you're busy, whatever, don't beat yourself up or do that. Just, the next day you do it. But the more you integrate it as part of your routine, as part of your life, the better results you're going to have. What? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that many, many years ago, when we just started meditating and started practicing Buddhism, one great Lama, Ayam Rinpoche, told me that when you wake up in the morning from sleep, directly from sleep, your energy is still very, very subtle. It hasn't really become all this very entrenched samsaric energy. It's still subtle mind and subtle energy. What we actually do in the 9 breath purification, especially the last one, when we merge consciousness with space, there is still some sense of that naturally when we arise first from our sleep. So he said that it's incredibly beneficial, and our heart chakra is still very, very warm and very, very open. He said that it's extremely beneficial that before you engage in the world, making coffee and doing this and this, just sit and meditate right at that time, using that awareness. And also looking, examining your whole day and reviewing how you've used your energy through the day in the evening, kind of give yourself a recoup. Because when you recoup at nighttime, you can all say, I could have done this better. I could have done this differently. So instead of just like having remorse and feeling guilty for, misconduct, during the day, you vow and you say to yourself, tomorrow or another day, I will not act this way. I promised I'm gonna act in a different way. You kind of like select something and you click a button in yourself. So for the next time, you can really revise because of your mind, you will revise your action. So morning and night are very, very important times.
The 37 Practices of Bodhisattva is on Nick's website, Solidago Productions. It's also, there's a link to it in the chat function on right now. So if you scroll down a bit and you'll find it. Why is attachment something to avoid? Isn't it essential, especially for relationships? That's a very good question.
Attachment is a mental state that's extremely, extremely narrow. That actually, attachment is kind of a delusory mental state. Because of attachment, our view is always extremely small. As a result of it, the kind of relationships we often have, if they're based on very, kind of untamed attachment, they become very unhealthy because, the way we relate to people, we don't love them and want to release them into their well-being. We want them to be our things. We want to possess them. We want to own them. And, that, of course, never leads to anything good. So, loving compassion as opposed to attachment is really what we're going for, in these practices in the Buddha Dharma path.
Did I understand that it's a belief that success in this life is from karma from a past life? It could be from karma in this life as well, but not just success, everything. People always think karma is this kind of cosmic retribution, system that, and when someone who's bad gets something bad happens to them, everyone points that to karma, which is true to an extent, but so is like everything else. Karma merely is cause and effect. It's very scientific if you think of action and reaction. So, we like to think, a lot of people like to think that the way the planets formed and evolution and things happen is completely random. But if you really look at things, the precision of cause and effect on a very macro universal level in terms of like the Big Bang and cosmos forming and evolution, and on a very, very micro level, like if I don't brush my teeth, I'm going to get a cavity. Everything happens because of cause and effect. Every single thing. And you can, that whole thing, the butterfly effect, the chaos theory, and the butterfly flaps its wings in Australia and it eventually affects the weather in, North America, is a very also Buddhist concept of interdependence, So, yes. So good, favorable conditions in this life often are the result of past karma. Yeah. But that does not mean that that's going to last. So if you may find yourself to be wealthy and have, a lot of your needs met in this life, but if you don't continually cultivate positive karma and use those advantageous conditions to cultivate more good karma, you'll exhaust that good karma and maybe have, horrendous conditions in this life and very difficult ones in this life or the next. When you indicate a good book about Buddhism for beginners, the Dalai Lama is always a good place to start. The Art of Happiness is a good one. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, the Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism is a good one. And Thubten Chodron writes a lot of really good books on beginning and basic Buddhism. Tubten Chodron, as does Lama Yeshe, Lama, capital Yeshe. I got into a comment war on Instagram with someone, and it went too far, and I feel shame over putting my anger out there that way. Thank you for the reminder not to put it on others. I just read a quote by a Lama, and I forget who it was. It might have been Chagda Togo, somebody, or Chacho Rinpoche, who said that, we practice so we don't feel shame. we adopt a certain ethical behavior, so we don't feel shame over it. And I mean, the fact that the awareness, instead of just settling into your righteousness, that this person was wrong and you were right, or this person, and that person may have said some hateful, evil things too, and you were defending yourself or a group of people or a way of thought and a belief, and you might feel righteousness, but you feel that your anger kind of tainted the experience, so both you and the other person kind of just cultivated and more poison. That's very positive that you have the awareness of that. That's really, really good. So next time, you get into this kind of thing, you may find a different approach, either not engage or try to engage in a way that where it doesn't become this completely contentious anger war,
Just check your intention before you engage, make sure
Yeah, very important.
that you cultivate your intention. This also means that you're not getting caught in the web of your negativity and their negativity. Transcend it by, cultivating intention before you act. Cultivate the right kind of intention. You can say all the same things, just make sure that the negative emotion, the poison, is not a part of what you're communicating.
Have you had times when you've fallen out of practice? And if so, how did it impact your life? I think you can answer that question yourself. Really, totally honestly. I mean, sure, there's times when you don't practice as much as you normally do, or you get lazy, or you're busy, or whatever like that. But I mean, obviously, it's something that's very important to us. That's why we're here and we do these things. So, how did it impact your life? If you're going to become less aware of your intentions, less mindful, you're going to fall back into habitual patterns that are very, very, very powerful and strong and set, and you become the habitual pattern you fall back into is the self, the ego and those things. How can I bring the changes I've experienced through meditation to the people I've hurt in my life? How do I take on the suffering in others that I have caused? I mean, if you become more mindful and you become more kind and more, that's gonna extend to the people in your life. And for people you've hurt, if you can make direct amends, that's always a good thing. But not if it's gonna, kind of reopen a wound, not if making direct amends to someone you've hurt is gonna hurt them even more, have them have to rehash that or go through something difficult or remember something, you know what I mean? It can't just be about you relieving your guilt about hurting them. But if you can do that in a positive way and have the wisdom to know that, making this amends is going to help, is going to make them feel better, that's a good thing. How do you take on the suffering in others that I have caused? That's a good question.
For answer to both of the questions, even before you make amends physically with them in person, practice Tonglen. You practice Tonglen all the time. You try to get to the place of where you're practicing on the spot. So when the person is being really, horrendous to you, instead of being horrendous back to them and being ignited by them, you practice Tonglen. But before you approach them physically, if you can't sustain it right on the moment and you've already done that, you've transgressed, you have remorse, practice Tonglen, visualize them in front of you, take all the suffering inside yourself, it dissolves in your heart chakra, through the light of your heart chakra, through the bindu of light, and you send them all the positivity. Practice that. First of all, that alleviates all kinds of things. It alleviates like years and eons of negativity. Also, if you do practice that, the next time you actually meet them in person, it'll be very, very easy for you to exercise that. You'll recall doing that practice on the cushion, and you'll be able to practice it directly with them when you're standing in front of them.
How much access, in quotes, access to our mind should we look to offer in our strongest love connections in life? Is the goal an all access pass?
Yes.
Yeah, yes and no, but your mind is your mind, right? You know, no one's going to be, no one can be in your mind, and you can't be in someone else's mind. Your mind is your mind. That's the point from which you perceive and interact, you know, with everything and with the world. Wisdom is an important aspect of this, you know, and as you practice and as you cultivate, you know, mindfulness and more loving kindness in these things, and start to understand the view, interdependence and impermanence and karma and emptiness and those things, you know, wisdom arises with that. And the wisdom aspect of the mind is what we need to work and cultivate with, so we know how much to give. We know how much to, like you say, how much access to our mind should we look to offer, and you know, that can easily border into certain, you know, codependent relationships when when you think about just giving all the time and not taking care of yourself. It's the wisdom aspect of the mind acts as a gauge to what we can really handle. You know what I mean? It's, you can't just go outside and give, you know, take off all your clothes and give it to, you know, somebody homeless, and then you're naked and you're going to freeze and die. And you know, it's like there's, you know, we have to honor that wisdom aspect of the mind and know, like what Victoria said before, you know how to be effective. You
Yes.
know?
And also it's very important that when you give, you check your mind. That relates to the previous question, you know, what's wrong with attachment? You know, when you give, you make sure it's not with these strings attached, that you right away in the act of giving have all these expectations, what the person should do, what they should be, how they should act. Make sure that you give freely, you know. As a parent, that means we give to our children, but we don't expect them to live for the rest of our lives with us and, you know, service us. You know, that our loved ones are not, you know, just some subservient beings to us. You know, give and don't expect, you know, give in freedom, give access. You know, wisdom and compassion are the same thing. It's like the sun is the wisdom and the warmth is the compassion. You know, make sure that those things are always together. Give skillfully, you know, give access, give, you know, whatever, you know, give benefit, you know, but make sure that it's always has like an aspect of liberation, an aspect of freedom. Don't give with strings attached, and know how much you can give. But always make sure that the giving is always like within the sphere of freedom. Give only as much as you can, so that the other person can be just a recipient and not become this like tight-held fist.
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
What do you say to someone who feels it's too late to practice meditation?
There's no such thing, sorry.
That sounds like laziness.
Never. There's never any such thing.
Sounds like laziness to me.
And what is too late? It's just a concept.
Yeah.
If you have another hour to live, you can meditate right now. You know, not to minimize anything. You might be in a very difficult kind of a circumstance. But actually, that's exactly the time to have awareness, you know, to go into whatever difficulty, you know, or whatever awaits us with the right mind. That's why we practice all the time, you know, to meet that moment, you know, that moment of difficulty, either like circumstantially now or the very final moment of difficulty when we're dying. We practice all the time.
Where can we get the instructions to learn how to practice Tonglen?
We can next week we can review it.
We can review it. We've Victoria, I think the first class Victoria taught was on Tonglen. So Nick, if you have that info, let me know. If not, we'll do a review of that next.
Review it. Tonglen is an amazing practice. Should be used all the time. This is what the Buddhas arise from. It's very, very important.
Will wishing the best for all beings ever feel natural, honest? When
Yes.
saying this, I always think about how I really don't wish the best for the objectively malicious and cruel, and then I feel like I'm lying. That's a really good question. And it's not necessarily wishing the best, you're wishing that for all beings to have happiness, right? Which I guess is the same thing. But we spoke in the past about, faking it till we make it, in a way. So yes, you may think this person is evil and does really things and doesn't deserve happiness, but in the Buddhist view, you always have to remember that non-duality and interdependence is the ultimate nature of reality, right? So there's no real separation on an ultimate level between you and anyone. So you're thinking in terms of like this collective. It's not about rewarding someone from bad behavior. And think about this, if this person really was truly happy or and ultimately enlightened, they're not going to be malicious and cruel anymore.
Exactly. And also, just think about it for a moment. You're saying they're cruel, and yet you're holding back something from them. You are expressing also negative emotion by even withholding something. Like wishing them happiness is the same thing as wishing them enlightenment. And as Michael said, when there's enlightenment, negative activity no longer applies. It's like saying, when somebody is mentally deficient, they have a mental disease, that you want them to be healthy, you want them to be restored. That's what you wish for, because truly, all the negativity comes from ignorance, and ignorance should be looked at as mental disease. Don't think of it as anything else. Don't go, that person is bad. Think of that person is ill and have compassion.
Okay. Last question. I'm dealing with an elderly senior grandfather who's getting pretty verbally abusive towards his daughter, my mother. His remarks break her down, shame her, and test her worth. I suggested meditation to my mother to help calm her thoughts, but I feel like she needs to confront him, communicate to him how she really feels. Any suggestions to communicate a better way of treating loved ones that can really cut through without shaming him or having it get intense? Well, yeah, I mean, being honest, and keeping the focus on, if your mother's confronting her father, how it makes, instead of saying, you're evil, you're bad, you're cruel, just say, the way you treat me makes me feel bad. The way you treat me makes me feel shame. The way I feel this and that, and I feel like, maybe she needs to set boundaries. I mean, it's hard to get really specific without knowing specifics. You know what I mean about this dynamic and these things, and boundaries, honesty, rather than perpetuating the cycle and lashing out back at him. But there's people need to be aware that there's consequence to their action. They need, which is karma, right?
Of course. And also, I mean, not that Michael and I are great advisors on this theme, but if your mother says to her father, to your grandfather, says, despite all the pain that you're bringing and unleashing on me now, I still love you, and if you can stay in that moment, it could be very, very powerful. The other thing to consider is, as people, are experiencing the end of time for themselves, they feel that, that moment is very, very near. They become often very agitated, they experience tremendous anguish, but they don't have any skillful means like meditation and other things to cope with it. So, anger fueled by fear, basically erupts at all, in every crazy way, So having compassion, having understanding for that, and, but for your mother to kind of not to be the target, but, to know that, this has to do with the mental state of fear. This has to do with the mental state of remorse, of all these things undone that your grandfather may be feeling. He's directing all that energy to her. But if you really maybe try to think and try to analyze and understand Why now? Why all this angry energy? Why all this kind of, bitterness and all this kinds of stuff? Maybe it has to do with the time of the day, the time of life for him. And, maybe armed with that understanding, the forbearance could be easier. And meditation, of course, always, because remember, people direct anger at us, but it doesn't necessarily specifically have to do with us. Anger will be directed at anything as long as it's there. That's the last stanza number 20 we just read. If the mind is not subdued, the enemies will only multiply. That's what anger does. Anger is just energy, and it'll spill, in the closest proximity, wherever that is. So in this case, it's your mother, the caretaker. And I'm sorry for her. It's difficult circumstances. I'm also sorry for your grandfather, because obviously, he's experiencing a lot of anguish and a lot of difficulty that he doesn't know how to deal with.
Thank you very much. Let's dedicate the merit from today's session for the benefit of all beings. By this merit may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Nick,
Happy New Year,
for your help. We could not do this without your kindness. Take care.